Welcome, everybody, to the newest episode of the Amateur Theory Podcast and the second episode of 2021. So we got a good show for you. We're going to talk about Withnail I, a cult classic British comedy film. We're going to talk about the surprising success of the new Demon Slayer movie. But before that, we all just saw the new trailer for Godzilla versus Kong. And I just want to hear everyone's kind of first impressions. The first question, I guess, is: did this trailer make you more or less excited about the movie? Did it just do its job of getting you hyped?
So, I should say that I did not feel very hyped for the premise of this movie. King Kong and Godzilla are just two IPs that don't incite excitement under most circumstances for me. But this sounded pretty silly, fun romp. And not every commercial delivers on expectations, but this one was working really hard to fit those expectations. I don't know. I thought there was almost something kind of comical about the commercial, like almost a Rick and Morty interdimensional cable vibe at times, where it was just like, we need Kong. There's a girl. She has a connection. But then there's something under the sea. And then like rap music. Oh, yeah. It's just, I'm sorry. It's just, there was so much. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it'd be fun.
You, Dale, because I know you're a Godzilla fan.
Yes, I've been a Godzilla fan since I was 4 years old. I've seen every movie, except for all the anime ones, I guess, technically. But frankly, who gives a shit about those? But I was going to see this movie no matter what, basically. So I didn't necessarily need a trailer to get me hyped, because I was just, oh, yep, Godzilla fighting King Kong. That is, for me, that gets me pumped. If we want an opposite perspective from Adam. But the trailer was silly, over the top, which is, it's Godzilla. It's two big monsters fighting. Like, what? What else are you gonna do? And this is the thing. The plot, the last Godzilla movie, like the actual human element, the plot was very You just go to see big monsters fighting each other. At this point, that's how I feel. And this trailer was basically just that, and it made it look very cool. Like fighting in a big neon lit city. It's like so yeah, I was already hyped, but I am still hyped.
So let me put my perspective, which is smack dab in the middle, I guess. My thing with the Godzilla movies is that every time one is about to come out, I think that looks really cool. I'm definitely gonna watch that, and then I don't. That's been a consistent theme of all the last. So of this franchise, right? The Monsters franchise. I've only seen one of them, which is the first King Kong. I've missed all of the others.
Kong Skull Island?
Yeah. So I saw that. That was the only one I've seen. I enjoyed that well enough. I'm sure I would have enjoyed the other ones. But they're not my favorite movie and I'm looking forward to. I'm not super excited to see them. I just think they look somewhat interesting. Given that HBO is doing this thing where they're putting out movies on their service, that makes me a little bit more excited than I would normally be. So I'll probably watch this one. In fact, this is probably going to be the next movie that we do for this podcast. Let's be real. Probably the biggest release coming up pretty soon. But I enjoyed the trailer. I thought it was fun. It looked a little silly, which I kind of like. I like campy, big action stuff. The only thing is that it seemed like there was a lot of plot elements. I don't know who this girl is. Is this stuff that, having seen all the other movies, is this previous things that you needed to have learned from watching it, or can I just jump into this, you think, and just be fine?
you can probably just jump into it and be fine. I mean, you might be lost on some stuff, but it doesn't really matter all that much because, like I said, the human drama was never quite what you went there for, and it was never that well done in the first place, I'll admit.
Is the girl, she's a recurring character, this person that Kong has a connection with?
No, I've never seen her before.
Okay. That's good to know, I guess.
Yeah,
I
somehow-
recognize some of the people from the trailer. Like, I think you saw 11 from Stranger Things for a split second. And she was in the last Godzilla movie.
I did recognize
along
her.
with her father character. I can't remember the actor's name. But yeah, but this girl with the fancy connection to Kong, and it looked like the woman who was talking about it, I don't recognize them. So
Yeah, somehow I doubt that these monster movies are going to be very purist. You need to know the lore for our big blockbuster action movie. I mean, you know, and here's the thing. I didn't want to give the impression that I'm like super dismissive of this movie, because that kind of movie where it's really silly does appeal to me on a certain sense. I've actually seen both Godzillas, both of the previous Godzillas. I don't think I've really ever seen a King Kong film now that I think about it. And I thought the first Godzilla that I saw of these recent franchise was actually pretty good. There were elements of it that I liked a lot.
I heard that the first Godzilla is supposed to be better than King of the Monsters, which is the most recent one.
Yeah, I didn't like this most recent one. It weirded me out in some ways.
yeah, I'd say that first Godzilla film is probably just the better movie. King of the Monsters has more big name kaiju fighting each other. So in that regards, it's a better movie. But yeah, the first Godzilla movie I'd say is probably the more well-made film. And out of all of them, I'd say Kong Skull Island's actually probably the best one. Just in terms of like a good movie. But I'm a Godzilla fanboy, so I go for Godzilla, not Kong.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I had to give like a final verdict, am I more or less hyped after the trailer? I'm going to put me firmly in the more hyped. Like, my expectations have been simultaneously lowered, and I am more excited for the movie simultaneously after watching this. That's kind of my feelings. What would you guys say as far as like a final verdict before we move on?
I think that it's not like this commercial put me off to the idea of it. I wasn't super high on it, the idea of watching it. Of course, it's on HBO. It's free. So I think I will. I think I will see it, especially if it's for this podcast. But my point is that this commercial didn't deter me from it. It just kind of confirmed my expectations.
Yeah, it like I said before, I was going to see this movie probably no matter what. And this it's a pretty fun trailer, I think. Like, it's silly. It was making me laugh, but in a good way. And I might even go to the theaters to see it just because I love Godzilla that much. It's big monsters like smacking each other around. It's made for the big screen.
Speaking of the big screen, that kind of brings us to our second topic. Demon Slayer, the movie, has broken records in Japan as now their #1 grossing movie of all time, beating out Spirited Away, which had the old title. And this is interesting for a number of reasons to me. Probably most because we're in the middle of a pandemic, which means that theaters are not at full capacity. They're kind of have limited seats. And this movie still managed to break the record as the most popular movie in Japan. We've talked a lot about this podcast about like kind of the downfall of movie theaters that's been happening in the US. So for like a movie in a different country to be breaking records, I mean, what do you think? Is that just like a testament to the popularity of the show, or is that this movie that good?
Well, have either of you seen the movie, or has it not even gotten like a release outside of Japan yet?
It has not been released officially outside of Japan, so I have not seen
Okay.
it. I'm also not a big subtitle guy, especially when it comes to anime. Um, you know, that I tend to prefer the dubs. I'm gonna wait for it before I watch this movie, but I am really interested in what this movie is, so I probably will watch it.
So, just counterpoint, I tend to like subtitles more. I generally think dubs are really awkward
Fight,
sounding.
fight.
So, but referring to the movie specifically, I am far from an expert on a lot of anime. I suspect that all of us on this channel, so I mean, if you are more knowledgeable about this topic, then feel free to shoot a comment down below. So I'm going to speak, hopefully not out of too much ignorance here. But one thing that I thought was interesting is that I have heard about anime movies before based on kind of these like shonen mangas, and typically they're kind of side adventures, and they show the manga,
Yeah, it's like a
full
long
story of the manga on TV. Like the show is what the real story, and then we'd get these side stories. And so I don't
Movies
know
are
what
just
precedence
elongated
there is.
filler.
It may be that there is precedence for this in Japan, and I'm just not familiar with it. But this is from my very like just American perspective, this is the first time I personally have heard that the direct continuation of the storyline for a very popular anime / manga series is adapted to film first, like as in the story continues on that film. And I'm wondering whether that is a strategy that may have had to do something with its success, though I have no idea if that's true or not, and so maybe someone on the ground around there might be able to comment more on that.
I actually didn't know that was the case. I just assumed this was like most of the other ones I'm familiar with, where it's basically like a long episode, right? They just take an episode of like this random adventure and they stretch it out to the length of a movie, and not like a plot moving episode, but like one of the filler episodes that they just made it long. That's what I'm used to if I'm thinking of like like a Dragon Ball Z movie or a One Piece movie or something. That's usually what I expect. So it's interesting to me that this would be more, you have, in order to know what's going on in the show, you have to have seen the movie. That probably does motivate people. Like it probably moves butts and seats, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, assuming that this is unique to that, I guess. But again, I'm not super familiar with the circumstances, but that is my understanding of what's going on.
Yeah. And well, I'm also just guessing that Demon Slayer is a already like huge property. Okay. I'd never heard of it until Braden showed me the article. But I don't really watch anime or keep up with it, so I'd have no idea.
So I have seen the show, and I've seen the full first season. And what I can say about it, if I was going to give it a review, like I said, I haven't seen the movie, but just like the show is another like typical anime film. Like the main character, his whole thing is like, I want to get stronger. He meets baddies that are progressively stronger and stronger, must beat the baddies by training, etc. Like you've heard this story before. Nothing new. The thing that makes it stand out, and I believe actually this is like the new most popular. So I think the oldest most popular anime for like years, I guess, was One Piece, and this has dethroned it. Like this is the new biggest top selling anime at the moment. And the thing that sets us apart, and it is set apart, it's actually pretty good, is the animation. The animation quality of the show is, I mean, like movie level. And every episode is like that. And so that's the draw to me. To me, it's not so much the plot or the writing. I mean, it's all serviceable. Like, it's fine. I'm not going to, like, say it's bad. but it's nothing new. It's just your typical anime show writing. But the animation is a step above, like considerably, I think.
So if the show's already got like movie level animation, does that mean
It's
like the
movie,
movie's animation like has transcended? Like,
I kind of hope that'd be pretty cool.
I mean, yeah, maybe I'll see it one of these days. I don't know.
I wonder if you could see the movie without seeing the show. If it is a continuation of the story, I wonder how self-contained it is. In my mind, in order to break records the way that it did, like it couldn't possibly just be fans watching it, right? Like that doesn't seem like it'd be. I can't think of a show ever that is popular enough that if only the fans of that show saw the movie, that it would become the number one, grossing movie like of all time. Which this is the case in Japan. So I imagine that it's self-contained enough that you could not know anything about Demon Slayer and probably come out enjoying it. And also, usually, like these really big, record-breaking movies are movies that you see more than once. I think it's like the story of Titanic. The reason it was number one is, obviously it was very popular, but also that people would see it multiple times. Same thing with Star Wars. So I wonder if this is the case, that it's the kind of movie that is good for multiple watchings. This is all speculation. I mean, I've never seen it, but
Yeah, none of us live in Japan, so we can't can't give you the full deets.
It is. Oh yeah.
Or just question, so I mean, I don't know anything about the situation in Japan, but like I guess theaters there, do they have to like social distance? Do you know?
Yes.
I've
Okay.
heard that is the case. Yeah.
Yeah, the article mentioned it, that they have to have limited capacity, that they're not able to fill every seat at once, but that apparently there was long lines to see this movie, despite the limited capacity, which I don't know how safe that is. Not making a judgment on that, but this movie was apparently good enough that it demanded that people wait in line to access these limited theaters. This is what Tenet wanted to be. Tenet wanted this and just was unable to make it happen. But
I still haven't seen
Demon
that
Slayer
movie.
The Demon Slayer movie, it achieved Tenet's dream.
Sounds like Nolan needs to find a new medium.
Yeah, when it gets its kind of American release, maybe we'll watch it on this show, and we'll be able to give you a more in-depth analysis of what this movie is, if it really lives up to the hype.
If it's actually better than Spirited Away.
Which, I mean, I love that movie. Like, I truly do.
Yeah, I love Spirited Away
I hope
too.
this is better. I'm all about seeing great movies, so I hope that you could beat it. That'd be awesome. I have my skepticism, but we'll see. So does anyone have any final thoughts on the Demon Slayer movie?
No. Can't comment. Haven't seen it.
All right, with that, we're going to turn to the movie we all watched for this episode, which is Withnail I, a 1987 kind of dark comedy, British comedy. As we usually do, kind of spoiler-free. Realize this movie is very old, but some viewers may not have seen it. So just without spoiling anything, what were your thoughts? Kind of how did you like the movie? Yeah.
Well, I'm interested to hear what you guys think first, because I've kind of grown up with this movie. I've seen it a fair amount of times, and I've known it since I was like a teenager. So it holds somewhat of a special place in my heart. Somewhat.
I mean, I can start. And just as an aside, in honor of this movie, I've been drinking this cold brew in honor of the one of the Withnail, the titular character, who is an alcoholic. This movie reminded me a lot of, and actually, when I was reading the Wikipedia page, apparently this is a direct inspiration to a lot of the kind of movies I was thinking in my head when I watched it. But like, if you like, apparently this was a direct inspiration for like Pineapple Express. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was actually the movie that came to mind most in my head about like a kind of a comparison, in the sense that it is a comedic movie about people who are constantly a little bit off their rocker. In this case, usually because of alcohol, but there are other substances involved. And it's kind of just a dark comedy, kind of about their lives. You know, nothing particularly amazing happens, but it doesn't need to because the characters are wacky enough to kind of carry the comedy. So overall, I would say that I enjoyed it. It was not the kind of movie that had me like in tears or, you know, I could doubled over laughing. I think the mood that I would kind of give as far as myself throughout the movie was it was amusing. Like the situations were amusing, not necessarily hilarious or, you know, I could, you know, whatever, but it was amusing all the way throughout. So that, you know, it wasn't a boring movie. It keeps your attention. The characters are fairly engaging. I wonder if I get the feeling, or I've heard in both in the Wikipedia article and I think JL, you might have told me this before we even watched it, that like a lot of the humor might be more geared towards, like, I guess there's a lot of British kind of aphorisms and things in there that I necessarily don't really know or aren't familiar with in terms of how they speak. So I might be missing some of the jokes, is what I'm saying, by not being British. So like I recognize that I might be limited in that capacity, but I still enjoyed it. It's still an enjoyable movie. So I guess that's my thoughts.
All right. So I think I may have enjoyed it a little bit more than Braden, and perhaps I was just in the right mood. But I don't know. I think that I would have like cracked up at this movie no matter what situation I was in. This is the spoiler-free portion, so I wish I could just quote the movie like over and over again at you to give a sense of what this movie is like. But it's there were parts when I was just scene after scene, and I was still laughing. It was just there's something about the way the characters deliver their lines that just so sincerely and saying such gibberish that it just hit me. I don't know how to put it, I suppose. And I also thought that the movie ended up being relatively profound. I think that you are right to bring up Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, because I actually think that it's similar in a lot of ways, like not only like in terms of humor in it often, but thematically as well.
Yeah, the end of an era thing. I mean, it's even
Right.
set the same time period. I think was things that kind of paralleled both movies.
Yeah, it was. So I think it was dealing with other days, and so, but yeah, the fact that it was so funny and also like willing to be so heavy, and yet at the same time, I don't feel like it ever sacrificed either side of itself, of this like heaviness, this willingness to be a little bit morose, and this kind of absurd, just. Um, Dialogue-based comedy that I thought was hilarious. I don't know. I loved it, actually.
Yeah. It's actually interesting that you guys both bring up Fear and Loathing, because that's actually kind of how I managed to find out about this film. Because I think the original like cover art or poster for this film is illustrated by Ralph Steadman, who did the artwork for the original Fear and Loathing book. And so that's how I found out about this movie. And yeah, like I said, I've grown up with it. It's always been one of my favorite comedies. And I really like that kind of infinitely quotable aspect of it. it's like kind of like The Big Lebowski, where almost every line is just almost gold. Like you can just quote it, and it's fun. And the movie's strengths really rely, I think, or a lot of it comes from the screenplay and the performances. Richard E. Grant as Withnail is amazing. He gives a just one of the best performances ever as like a miserable drunken asshole, like the kind of person you like hate probably to like hang out with in real life, but who's hilarious to watch on screen. And the funny thing is that actor doesn't even drink. Like he had never drank before or acting in that movie, and the director actually like had to force him. He's like, well, you have to get drunk at least once just to give some truth to your performance. And I think that's a testament to his acting chops, because he pulls it off with great skill. So yeah, this is like, I guess depending on who you are, like for me, I think the first time I see it, I wasn't necessarily laughing out loud like constantly, but I was kind of like Braden said, amused. I was very much enjoying it. Like it's just fun to see these characters interact, to hear their, I guess, gibberish. It's witty gibberish. And yeah, the movie, and I like the tone because there's kind of always this melancholic like cloud of despair kind of hanging over the film, but the movie treats it like somewhat like farcically. It's like you have to laugh at this or else like you'll want to kill yourself, something like that. Yeah, this is the thing. I've only ever met one other person in my life who knew this film, and they were from the UK. Like, from my experience, Americans just don't seem to know this film, which is kind of a shame because it's like it definitely deserves its status as a cult classic. It's I don't know. It's a very well written, very well acted film.
So I guess the consensus is everyone liked it. You know, because I kind of like the our kind of like 3-star scale: good movie, bad movie, mediocre movie. I think this we can say it's a good movie. You know, don't get too granular about like the 7 out of 10s or the 9 out of 10. You know, it was it's a good movie.
What's the difference between the 7 and an 8 anyway?
Exactly.
It is a good movie, and you should watch it. There.
I guess before we end the spoiler-free bit, just one final question that we like to ask here, which is, could you recommend this to anyone, or is there a specific type of person who might enjoy this movie and a type of person that might not?
So, I think this is kind of a weird Rorschach test of a movie. Because I do think maybe that this is not a movie for everyone, but at the same time, I don't know how you would determine that person until they've seen the movie. So I feel like put on the movie, watch it together, and if they respond positively, they're that type of person.
Fair enough. I guess I will say this. I think there is a fundamental difference between British and American comedy. I don't know if I could articulate it super well right now. I'm sure other people have written about this before. I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with this idea. But this strikes me as very, very British comedy. And so if you are a fan of British comedy, then this is probably, you're going to enjoy this. If you've seen British comedy before and you're like, this is not, I don't like this style of comedy. I think that the difference is I think British comedy tends to be darker. It tends to be more.
Yeah, they're all miserable and they hate themselves.
Like that seems to be the joke, right? Like, I mean, there is. I don't want to like pigeon it as if like that's all a British comedy, but I think that tends to be kind of more true, um, as far as I can tell. So anyway, it's dark humor, so you have to like dark humor, and it's it's very British. So if those things sound appealing to you, then by all means go for it. If you're not a fan of dark comedy, if you're not a fan of British comedy, I guess for whatever reason, then maybe this one isn't for you.
Yeah, I'd say because a lot of the humor is very like dialogue heavy, and if that's like does that interest you? Like
it has some good slapstick
banter,
moments,
like
though.
back and forth. Like it definitely does, but a good chunk of it comes from the actual dialogue itself. So I'd say if that kind of that sounds appealing to you, then go for it. But I also think it's worth just watching for Richard E. Grant as Withnail. I love that performance. It's brilliant.
All right. Well, with that, we will end the spoiler-free portion. As always, if you haven't seen it and you don't want it spoiled, don't click us out. Just pause, watch it, come back. But spoilers from here on out. So it's interesting that Withnail is your favorite character here because he was not my favorite character. I liked him, but actually the drug dealer buddy to me was the standout character.
Danny?
He was the one who made me laugh the most, for sure. I couldn't get enough of him.
Yeah. Actually, I think the first time I saw the movie, he might have been my favorite character too. But it's just because he's kind of that stereotypical drug guy, but also at the same time not
different.
quite. I don't know how to explain it.
He's more philosophical. It's like a stoner philosophical. So like nothing he says makes any sense whatsoever, but it sounds more profound. He's not like just saying like, "Whoa, dude, far out." Like there's more to it than that. He's like making these points. I have a terrible memory, or I'd quote his lines to you, but they're just like hilarious. There's like the thing about it, like an elevator. He's like, "So you think about the elevator, like, do you get off the elevator, or do you get higher?" And then he smokes the joint, and like that's like such a stupid metaphor. Like, what are you saying? But at the same time, like it's very clever, first of all, and it sounds like something that could be profound, right? Especially if you were inebriated, it could sound more profound than it is. Like it's perfect. And so like he had so many moments like that, which I just found amazing. So yeah, I guess he was my favorite. I did like Withnail. I mean, he's very much a dick. So he's also in a sense unlikable. I guess I felt for the lead a little bit with all the ways that Withnail kind of like fuck with him. But that being said, his performance of playing the drunkard, of not only just a drunkard but like the entitled drunkard, was very convincing for sure.
Yeah, it's just a spoiler review. This movie, just like us, gonna be quoting our favorite lines.
Can I?
Go for it.
You've got to help us. We've gone on holiday by mistake.
Love that. He's like, "Don't you threaten me with the dead fish." The poacher just walks into the bar, pulls an eel out of his pants, and just smacks it on the counter.
Are we there? No, we're not. We're here, and it's like raining. It's just. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a great film.
We should talk about I can't remember the name, but the uncle, right?
Uncle Monty, who's
Yes, the flamboyant monkey, who I recognize from Harry Potter as
Yes.
Mr. Dudley. I really appreciated his whole role here as like the eccentric, flaming homosexual man who puts our lead into many uncomfortable circumstances. It was that whole bit is just hilarious to me.
Yeah, I love like just he's such like an eccentric aesthete. Like he'll go on like these like lyrical monologues. He's like, what a thing it is in your youth to know that you will never play the Dane. Such crushing moments, something like that.
I'm just saying, like I said, I didn't laugh a lot for this movie. More kind of like, amusing. But something that did actually make me laugh was when he came into the room in the night and was like, "We don't have to play these games anymore. Like, I want you."
Yeah.
And the guy's like,
Yeah, that aspect of the movie, I wonder if that hasn't aged quite as well. Like,
yeah, I
like
mean, I like to think, and like I actually think that as if you can kind of separate that the joke isn't necessarily that he is homosexual, but the joke is that he is unwanted creepy advances, which is also dark, right? So admittedly that it'd probably feel different under, but yeah, I
that
maybe
being said, it is kind of hilarious. Like the
yeah.
way just that film is, or that scene is like filmed and directed and presented. And apparently, I guess that was the director and writer Bruce Robinson. I guess that was actually inspired
By a real
by
moment. Yeah, I saw that.
yeah, because he was in the '60s version of Romeo and Juliet, the film, and he uh, was in played a character in that film. And I guess the director like was a creepy director that wouldn't leave him alone. Yeah.
We just like to briefly touch on it. I think it's kind of cool that this movie was partly produced by George Harrison of the Beatles fame, and also apparently Ringo Starr had some kind of like consulting role or something. And so this movie got to have a Beatles song in it, which most movies don't get to do. Um,
And it's a George Harrison song too.
yeah. The soundtrack in general was pretty cool. As far as like the 60s aesthetic of it in general, I guess we could talk about some of the themes of the movie. You're talking about like an end of the era. It wasn't kind of as central of a focus as it was in Fear and Loathing, of like, the 60s are ending, we're entering a new, but it was touched on multiple times, particularly by Danny, saying, you talked a lot about how like, this is 1969, like it's all over, we're moving on. And that is kind of emblematic of, I don't remember the main character's name, the titular I. He's also
well, you never learn his actual name in the movie.
Okay.
He's just and I. Even in the credits,
Yeah.
it's and I.
Well, and I, he's also moving on, right? The 60s are over. He's gonna move on with his life at the end of the movie. He's going to miss Withnail, but he also is ready to let him go. He's not trying to maintain the relationship.
Yeah, can we talk about that ending for a second to this film?
Yeah, the quote.
Or just the first time I saw this movie, like I was, generally having a blast, it's a good comedy. And then but the ending kind of is just like almost blindsides you. It's
not funny.
yeah, it's a downer.
Yeah.
But it's fitting, I think. It actually kind of fits with Noel's like or his arc, like because he's just been a huge asshole basically to the other character, I, in this whole film. And you almost kind of get the sense that I just kind of has to have like has been dealing with him just because he kind of has had to. And sure, they're like they've had some like funny and fun moments, but like ultimately like they were like they weren't getting anywhere. They were just like getting drunk or high all the time, just being miserable. And he has the chance to get away, and Withnail's being left behind. And it's a pretty somber but real moment. And it ends with him quoting Hamlet, which is just.
Yeah, you've been kind of talking about with the performance of Withnail. You mentioned the actor's name. I can't remember it right now.
Richard E. Grant.
That's right. He and I did that moment kind of did strike me. It's a great performance of this Hamlet line in this show that is not Hamlet. It is just where this guy is a failed actor who like ignores opportunities that are available to him because it's not good enough for him, among other things. And so this guy essentially has like stared reality in the face and rejected it, which is kind of the narrative, right? This I character is prepared to accept reality and kind of enter the working world. He's got a role in a new play or something like that, right? And I think that another interesting aspect of this theme is that these characters are warned about the idea of behind this film over and over again. We were talking about Monty before, and just very briefly to kind of touch on the homosexuality thing. I thought it was nice for a film like in 1987 for the characters to end up feeling sympathetic to this character, and also for lines like I'm used to sleeping on the couch. It's kind of like a acknowledgement of like people as people, like we're still experiencing things whether you're homosexual or not. But the point is that the point I'm trying to make is that Monty all throughout this film is making statements about the end of an era, about accepting the end of things. The drug dealer in this film is making these statements, and people are constantly saying things about this. And we even see imagery. There's a moment where there's a wrecking ball destroying like the tenement houses, you might remember, like that they're walking away from. And so it's happening all in front of these characters' eyes, and they're just kind of just shambling around oblivious to it until the lead character realizes he's getting evicted, and that hasn't even been thought. And Withnail doesn't seem to care even at the very end. I thought that like the movie is funny. It really is funny, but I think that it really treated its themes effectively. It never forgot them the entire film, even when it was cracking jokes. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Have you guys heard about the original ending? So apparently there was an ending that was cut, and the original ending, Withnail has the same Hamlet quote, I guess, but also like he kills himself at the end. Or actually, I don't even know if the Hamlet quote is there, but he.
Yeah, I read about that. Like he uses a shotgun and shoots himself. I don't know if that was ever like filmed or anything. I think
but it was the original written ending.
Okay.
What do you guys think about, how would you have felt about the movie if that had been the ending? Would it have affected your enjoyment? Do you think they made the right move about changing it?
I think so, because the suicide ending would have been maybe too drastic of a tonal shift. Like I could still see it fitting somewhat, but I kind of like the more like somber, like poetic tone of
and I said that it wasn't funny, but it is still a little absurd about this drunken guy yelling Hamlet lines in the park. Like it's still kind of like
it's just a bunch of like dogs behind a fence that aren't paying attention. Oh, it's beautiful. I love it.
So yeah, I would agree. I think they definitely made the right move about not using that ending. And the ending that we got was pretty great. So I don't know if I would have messed with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's often a concept in storytelling. I've heard like according to one writer that I follow, they call it the promise, which is this idea that in your story, there you can't. It's okay to blindside like the readers with information or something, but those same readers or viewers or the audience essentially, they can't be blindsided in a way that makes them like feel cheated. So, and I think that ending does feel a little bit like cheating because there wasn't anything in the film that implied that kind of result. So I feel like you'd have to structure something, kind of foreshadow that kind of consequence earlier on in the film to pull off an ending like that. Yeah, I think it ended well the way it did. Because, like I said before in the non-spoiler section, I felt like this movie never sacrificed its comedy for its tone, for its like kind of sadder tone. And I think it did that well because we got to see the sadness in everyone's dialogue. Everyone was talking about it, Monty, the drug dealer, etc. And the characters were just kind of like ignoring it, right? But there isn't anything to imply that people are killing themselves over this. I don't know. I agree. I think that this ending was good.
What's everyone's favorite scene? If you had to pick one, I could start. Let's give you guys time to think. My very favorite scene, I think, is the ending scene where they have that giant joint. But even before that, he finds, when the main character finds the stranger in the bathtub, and there's kind of like full outrage that is just quickly dissipated as soon as he mentions that he's got this like, grass for Mexico, and then all of a sudden there's no more problems. They're on the couch, and then he starts waxing poetic. That a whole series of events, I think, might have been my very favorite part of the whole movie.
I actually really like the beginning. We're first introduced to the characters, and then the not Withnail, the other character, I, is like freaking out, like, because he's like just too high. He's like, I think I'm overdosing. And then Withnail's, and then they try to like deal with the sink, which is the most grodiest thing I've ever seen. And they're like, I think something's alive.
It's like, what does it matter? Where's it coming from? That's pretty good. My favorite scene. I think that one of my favorite scenes for sure. I'd have to think back if this is my favorite, but one of my favorite scenes is the main character is seen driving the entire film, and then at one point it cuts and he's asleep in the back of the car. And we realize that Withnail is driving, and like a Jimi Hendrix song is playing in the background, and you see him drive, and like the way he's driving is just whenever there's a car, he just gets in front of it.
Right in front of it. There's so much space, but he just doesn't anything.
And the cops like pull him over, and then they like make him take like a piss test, and they flip over the curtain, and there's like a tube coming out of his pants,
which was set up.
That whole sequence is just I love that.
Get in the back of the van! I love that one cop.
Oh, the one cop.
He's like screaming. I love it.
All right. Does anyone have any final? Oh, yeah.
Or just a fun fact I want to bring up. Apparently, there's a drinking game associated with this movie where you, as the viewer, try to drink every drink that Withnail is seen drinking in this movie, which I think if you actually did all that, that might kill you. I'm not sure.
Well, what is that? What is it? Antifreeze or like?
Oh, he drinks like it's not antifreeze. It's a lighter fluid.
Yeah, there's like a joke made about like I might drink antifreeze. It's like, don't mix your drinks.
That whole sequence was excellent. It's like, you're holding out on me. You have some.
What's in your tool shed? You've got antifreeze. You should never mix your drinks.
But yeah, that. I'm sure it would. If you actually tried to go, I mean, hopefully, even if you excuse that, you don't drink. And here on Amateur Theory Podcast, we do not advocate drinking any kind of lighter fluid or antifreeze under any circumstance.
I mean, no, if you play the actual game where you try to drink, I don't think they replace the lighter fluid with, I think, like something else. It's don't drink actual lighter fluid. Oh my god.
But no, it would just be a lot of alcohol in general because he is always drinking at all times. I think maybe a more tame version of the game is just to take a sip of your drink every time you see Withnail with a drink.
Yeah, maybe.
You don't have to match his chugging of liquor and such that he does throughout. If you wanna be a little safer and still have fun.
No, you got to match every drink. You got to match every drug, every cigarette.
Oh gosh,
it's a joke. We're not endorsing that.
Yeah, when he's not drinking, he is smoking. Like basically at all times, there's something going on with him. But okay, is there any other like kind of final thoughts about Withnail I? Go watch it. Go watch it.
Yeah, seriously, it's a great cult classic comedy, and you will get a entire notebook filled with quotable lines at this film. It's pretty brilliant.
All right, and with that, we're going to go into what we've been watching. So I can start. I have just just before this podcast, I have completely rewatched for the second time Midnight Gospel, which is a Netflix show. It is a podcast that is animated, essentially. But the animation and what they're talking about with the podcast aren't necessarily related all that much. But there is the podcasts are interesting, and then the animation is perhaps even more interesting. And there is like a storyline that kind of fits all the podcasts together. It's a great show, enough that I have now watched it for a second time, and would recommend it to anybody. Has anyone else watched anything?
I saw Adam's screen go up, so I thought he was going to say something.
Oh, sorry. I was just waiting to see if someone was going to interject. I have been watching a lot of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which I have never seen. I can see how it launched Will Smith into a star. Like, he's just like pure charisma on that show. I gotta say, the comedy is pretty tame. Like, they generally tend to just make a bunch of short jokes. Like, the entire season is my experience with a lot of the comedy on that. But, it's fun. And I'd never seen it before, so.
All right. Well, I've got you guys all beat because this past week I watched every single Twilight movie.
Really?
I not by myself. I watched them online with a friend. But I went through this whole series, and
what are your final thoughts?
I think it almost nearly killed me. I don't know, but okay. So the first movie I might actually consider so bad it's good. The first movie is actually pretty entertaining. And then the others are just kind of there's a lot of silly stuff, but they can actually be fairly boring at times, until you get to the very end when there is just this like huge fight scene out in the snow. Like, people are like ripping each other's heads off. A dude like punches the ground and it like splits open and you see like lava. Someone like takes another person and just like throws them in front of a wolf, and the wolf starts eating her. Dude, it actually owns. It's pretty awesome. So, I mean, so it's kind of like Avengers Endgame, basically, is what I'm saying. This was Avengers Endgame before actual Avengers Endgame.
All
No,
right.
but yeah, I mean, like, I watch these movies as like kind of a joke and to get a laugh out of them, and like, I did, but if you're interested in that, if you really want to do this, just watch the first movie and then like watch the last half hour of the last movie, and you're good.
All right. And with that, that wraps up another episode of the Amateur Theory Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, please give us a follow, give us a like, subscribe. We read all the comments on our YouTube channel. So if you post a comment and have a suggestion about what you would like us to watch next, we're all ears, or all eyes. I don't know. But until next time.
Bye bye.